Recording?
Yep. All right. Okay, let's look at membrane transport. There's three major classes or categories of membrane transport. The first one we can call simple diffusion or simply just diffusion by itself. And that's sometimes called passive transport. The second method is what's called facilitated diffusion. Now, what does it mean to facilitate something? It's like an ACT verbal question. If somebody facilitates you on studying for that upcoming exam, what are they doing?
Helping.
Excuse me?
Helping.
They're helping you out. So facilitated diffusion is like simple diffusion, except it requires the assistance of something. And that something is going to be membrane proteins. And we'll see more on that in a little bit. And finally, last but certainly not least, is active transport. Okay, now, let's look at this next column. When I say direction, I'm not talking about are you going out of the cell, into the cell, or from the inside the cell or to the outside the cell. That doesn't matter. When I'm talking about direction, I'm talking about direction in terms of concentration. Can you move something from an area of high concentration down to an area of low concentration? Or can you take something from low concentration and push it into an area of high concentration? So that way you can get rid of things you don't want, no matter how much is on the outside, or you can stockpile stuff you do want, like nutrients or what have you. Okay, so let's take a look at these. Simple diffusion can only go from high to low concentration. Likewise, facilitate diffusion, high to low concentration only. Active transport, however, it's unique. Because active transport is the stuff that is the methods that can take something from an area of low concentration and move them to an area of high concentration. So we can go low to high here. And that allows, once again, cells to stockpile stuff, cells to get rid of stuff that they don't want, even if there's a lot of it outside, and what have you. Now, column number 2, does this process use energy? Well, as we'll see a little bit later, when you go from high to low concentration, that is an exergonic process. It actually releases energy. Now, granted, it doesn't release that much energy, but it releases energy, so it means once it starts, it will continue until the concentrations even out. So, simple and facilitated diffusion are exergonic. They don't need any supply of energy. And if going from high to low concentration is exergonic, what's going to happen if you go the opposite direction, low to high concentration? That's going to be endergonic. And what that means is you need a source of energy to do that. So active transport requires energy in some form. Many times the energy is going to come from ATP hydrolysis, but that's not the only way to do it. Now, next thing, does it use proteins? In the case of simple diffusion, molecules go directly through the lipid bilayer of the membrane. You don't need any proteins to help it out or anything like that. So, simple diffusion does not use proteins. I'll put another column here. And a final one here. Okay. Now, facilitate diffusion and active transport. Both of those processes require specific membrane transport proteins. Those are going to be proteins that span through the membrane entirely, and they will either form a channel that a molecule can pass through, or they'll grab onto it and somehow push it through the membrane in one way or another. More on that later. But both facilitate diffusion, in fact, the facilitated part of this is due to those membrane proteins. So, facilitate diffusion and active transport require the use of specific membrane proteins to do that. Now, next column, specificity. In other words, how selective is this process? Turns out simple diffusion is not too selective. It prefers molecules that are hydrophobic because you're passing through a cell membrane, through a lipid bilayer, and prefers molecules that are small. So if you're small and hydrophobic, you can cross the membrane easily. If you're big and polar, forget it. Okay, so specificity, simple diffusion is relatively non-specific. But it prefers small and hydrophobic, especially both. On the other hand, when we look at facilitate diffusion and at active transport, both of them require proteins. These proteins are highly selective in what they'll carry across. They may carry one thing exclusively and not even closely related molecules, or they may carry a limited number of molecules that are very similar. For instance, there are transport systems that will take sodium but not potassium ions across, and vice versa. There are transport systems that take a range of 6-carbon sugars but not 5-carbon sugars, and not all 6-carbon sugars. There are several transport systems that each carry certain amino acids and not others. So, in these cases, both facilitate diffusion and active transport are specific. I think I got that. Okay, examples. What kinds of things can get transported across? Lots of things, including stuff you don't want, can cross the membranes by simple diffusion, because it's not really that specific. If you're small and hydrophobic, you're going to get across as long as you're going from high to low concentration. Okay, on the other hand, we talk about facilitate diffusion and active transport. A lot of ions get transported by both means. Nutrients, things like amino acids, nucleotides, sugars, that type of stuff. Those molecules, and this is the core of digestion, how organisms absorb nutrients from the outside. Remember our yeast cells that were growing up? Even the ones living in the rich media, they had all these amino acids and all these goodies around them. They would have died if they could not take them from the culture medium, transport them across their membranes, and get them into themselves so they could use that for energy and making more proteins and whatever the case was. Okay, so ions, we can say a wide range of nutrients. And many others. Okay, that's sort of a summary chart here. Now, question here, is it hot in this place?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, good. It's you, not me. I do not want to go to the ER again. I've had that twice in a month. Bad. Okay, not good. All right, we're going to pause right here.